It's 1981 in Colchester County, a bucolic region of small towns and farmland near Windsor, Ontario. A place where neighbor knows neighbor and few people lock their doors. Until the trust that binds this community together is suddenly shattered. A woman arrives at her neighbor's door in the early morning hours. She's been the victim of a vicious crime. The first in a string of crimes that will terrorize the region.
Well, this was something we hadn't really seen before. It was something we weren't prepared for.
It was a mystery man. There wasn't really a clear picture of who was doing this.
You realize that you have a ticking time bomb out there that's going to happen again.
Initially, this was a case that was probably never going to be solved.
Terror will reign over Colchester County for more than 18 years, until a revolution in forensic science strikes fear into the heart of a predator. August 31st, 1981. Police get a call from a 65-year-old woman.
Division, Smith and Dibley.
She indicated that two men had broken into her house and had stolen her car.
As far as I knew, it was just a break and enter.
But when the police arrive at the crime scene, they learn there's a lot more to the story.
I did a circle check of the house and found that the phone wires had been cut at the rear of the residence. They were trying to prevent her from calling for help.
The air conditioner had been pulled out of the front window and was outside of the house on the ground, which showed us the point of entry. In the house, there was mud leading up the steps.
The trail of mud leads police to a shocking discovery.
The bedroom door was actually kicked in.
That was such a violent act that it had broken the door frame in half.
In the bedroom itself, there was chairs upside down, and there appeared to have been a struggle.
When investigators question the victim at the neighbor's house,
It's okay, take your time.
they discover that she is overcome by emotion.
I asked her, well, what is it you want to tell me? And
He tore my nightdress and...
With the encouragement of investigators, she now tells the full story. The victim says that she had fled to her bedroom after hearing the intruders, and that one man had followed her upstairs.
He threw the lady on the floor and ripped her nightgown off. She had been sexually assaulted. At first, it was disbelief when we heard this, that someone would do this to this lady. It was very disturbing.
But the attacker is interrupted when the second intruder comes upstairs.
The other suspect saw what he was doing and said, "Let's go." And they stole her car when they left.
Obviously, she was petrified. So she remained in this bedroom, awake, I'm sure, the entire night, afraid, alone, terrified of, is this guy coming back?
Investigators can find nothing that points them to a prime suspect. There are no fingerprints because the intruders wore gloves. The victim cannot describe her attackers because they wore balaclavas. And outside the house, there are no discernible footprints or tire tracks except those from the stolen car. The victim tries to get on with her life, but she lives in constant fear that her attacker will return.
She was traumatized, and it basically ruined the latter part of her life, this attack.
1 year later, on November 17th, 1982, a woman living in an isolated farmhouse settles down for a quiet night.
suspect then moved her to the bedroom and sexually assaulted her in her own bed.
He keeps her hostage for hours and then steals her purse. The victim cannot bring herself to report the crime until a full day has passed.
What can be more embarrassing than having to tell a group of people how they've been degraded, how they've been assaulted, and then to repeat that over a number of times to different people for different purposes.
In the investigation that follows, police find no evidence that identifies the attacker, and they doubt that the cases are connected.
In the first instance, the obvious intention was to steal the car. In the second occurrence, the obvious intention was the sexual assault.
And on the second attack, the victim actually said that there was only one person in the house.
But when they compare the two crime scenes, they draw a different conclusion.
At that point, I noticed there was some similarities. The culprit had entered through a first-story window. The phone wires were cut to the residence.
The victim's description of the attacker also matches the previous crime.
He wore dark clothing, his hands were covered with gloves, and he had a balaclava.
Investigators see one other similarity. Both women are in their early 70s.
Targeting elderly women is an unusual characteristic. It may simply be that these were victims who were available, just like a wolf picking off the weakest of a herd to attack.
But I think what made them vulnerable was that they lived far enough from their neighbors and they lived alone.
But police consider another reason for targeting seniors.
The person may choose an elderly victim just like a pedophile chooses a child, because that's a particular group that specifically arouses them.
This was something that was very unique and very upsetting.
So it was very disturbing. I mean, we all have mothers, we all have grandmothers.
As police search for the sexual predator, the attacker continues to prey on the innocent. His penchant for violence is growing. Leaving the 73-year-old victim tied to her bed, the rapist steals her valuables.
The selection of minor, trivial, personal items may well serve as a stimulus for further fantasy. So these are like souvenirs that will bring back a memory of an experience that they want to recapture and which is arousing for them.
What happened afterwards, the attacker left and she heard him drive away. She went out and listened, waited for the vehicle to go away, and then eventually, after sitting on her porch for a while, walked to her daughter and son-in-law's house, still with binder twine that he had tied her to the bed with on her ankle.
By now, police are profoundly worried, especially because of something that was said to the last victim.
He said that next time he would kill her.
Those who are sexually excited by causing injury and pain and suffering and humiliation of their victims may well require more violence to sexually arouse them.
How far will the attacker go? And will his appetite for sexual violence finally drive him to make a mistake? Three women living alone in the Colchester area have been sexually assaulted and robbed. At the third crime scene, police discover a semen stain on the victim's nightgown, the first piece of physical evidence that could point to a suspect.
In the early 1980s, if there was a semen stain that was found on a piece of evidence, the only kind of analysis that could be done was ABO typing.
This technique establishes blood type. The semen sample from the third attack comes from a person with type O blood.
The only thing that really could be done in this case was eliminating people who had A or B or AB blood types.
This leaves everyone who is type O.
40% of the population are type O, and to go after 40% of the population is ridiculous.
But blood type can be combined with other information to build a case, and police do have other clues. First, All three victims describe an attacker of a similar stature. They also agree on something else.
The victims indicated that their attackers spoke with an accent, so we started looking heavily at the immigrant community.
Colchester South is quite a mix of people who've lived there for many generations, from actually many different European ethnic backgrounds.
I was thinking it might be an immigrant worker from another area because being a farming community, there were a lot of workers that come in during the harvest season.
But their biggest break comes after the third victim reports that her attacker drove away in a car with a noisy muffler. When patrol officers in the area hear a car matching that very description, they are desperate to question the driver.
Can I have your name, please, sir?
Then they notice that he speaks with an accent.
I ask you to get into the car, please.
And there is something else.
And the officers found binder twine in the vehicle. The third victim was bound to the bed with binder twine. Found knife blades with a black substance on the knife blades.
The man's name is Manuel Fortuna. When police bring him in for questioning, they learn that he lives just down the street from the third victim. And more suspiciously, cannot account for his whereabouts on the night of the attack.
Where were you that night?
At a bar.
What would the bar be called?
Those things put together drew some heavy suspicion onto Mr. Fortuna.
Police decide to lay charges against him. A bizarre turn of events now puts the man in an even worse position. When his wife hears of his arrest, she comes forward with some additional evidence.
There is blood.
Information came from his wife that she had gotten a pair of underwear from him that had blood on it.
Out all night, always at the bar. I can't keep track of him.
When police test the blood, they find that it is type O, the same as the attacker. But the evidence is not enough to get a conviction, so police use it to push for a confession.
Let me ask you this. Why is your wife coming down here?
I really don't know.
But the man does not break.
At the time we dropped the charges on Mr. Fortuna, the investigation essentially was dead. We had no place to go, we had no evidence to go from, and nothing forthcoming in the immediate future that we could see that was going to help us.
Police try everything to prevent another attack, advising the public on safety measures, stepping up patrols, but the predator feeds off their efforts. On a spree of escalating violence that targets 3 more women. The eldest is 83 years old.
The 6th victim had been beaten up quite badly. She had bruises on her face and her arms. Something was going to happen where he would kill one of these ladies, whether he would kill them on purpose or that a heart attack could claim him.
Desperate for help, local investigators turn to the Ontario Provincial Police for backup. Together, they form a task force. They start by reviewing every scrap of evidence and asking every possible question.
Who delivers your oil? Who delivers your newspaper? Do you have anybody cutting your lawn? Did you have a roofing job done recently with a gang of guys up on your roof? Anything at all.
The investigators also seek out new forms of crime analysis.
I went anywhere that I could go that I thought might shed some light on who we were looking for. And at that time, the FBI were into crime profiling.
The FBI agrees to help Canadian investigators produce a profile of the Colchester Rapist.
We'll look at the conduct of the offender in his interaction with the victim. We'll look at the level of violence, the type of sexual activity, factors that might suggest this offender is aware, conscious of the risk of being identified through forensic evidence. And sometimes we might be able to associate crime scene behavior to known criminal personalities.
This is an individual who doesn't have much power, authority, much significance in the real world. And so through these attacks on elderly women, he's able to feel empowered.
Today, police did release an unknown offender profile, the same ones commonly used by the FBI. It was produced by special investigators with the OPP. The suspect is a white male in his 30s who is probably familiar with the victim. He would be a loner, not physically powerful, with a history of domestic strife.
The profile partially fits their strongest suspect, Manuel Fortuna. It also generates a list of 200 new suspects. But the suspect list is vast and unspecific and creates more work for the already busy investigators. Fear and frustration plague the community.
There was a lot of fear after the first few attacks because there was so many unanswered questions, and they were such horrible crimes.
There were a good many people who, had elderly relatives living in the county and didn't want them terrorized.
It changed a lot of people's lives. A lot of houses went up for sale.
Women did sell farms or move into town or move in with family.
They were just terrified to stay at home by themselves.
The work of investigators has been widely publicized. Everyone knows about it. So when the rapist strikes again, there is no doubt about the message.
Well, there's no question about it. It's a kick in the teeth.
They're above average intelligence, most of them, and they often get a kick out of being ahead of the authorities.
But this time, the attacker has made a crucial mistake. He's stolen a piece of traceable evidence that could blow the case wide open. Frustrated by a violent predator that rapes and robs elderly women, Colchester police are no closer to finding their attacker. But when the rapist steals the purse of his latest victim, she remembers something distinctive that she left inside.
There was the first piece of actual traceable evidence stolen, and it was a $20 bill.
Which had something written on it or stamped on it.
Someone had scribbled an odd comment about a politician on the bill.
It had Pierre Trudeau resigned today written on it.
Police now release information about the bill to the media, hoping that it will generate a lead. Within a day, they hit pay dirt.
We got a call from a linen supplier, a guy who drops off hand towels and so on in bars.
They indicated that they had gotten the bill in payment from Silver's Tavern.
It was a strip bar in Windsor.
The bartender vaguely remembers receiving the marked bill for a drink. The man who paid him was a part-time employee at the establishment.
Hey, honey, take a break.
His name is David Chevalier.
He ran and got coffee for the strippers, and he cleaned up any messes that might occur and this kind of stuff.
Come with us, please.
Police take him in for questioning.
You know why you're here today?
When confronted by the evidence of the $20 bill, Chevalier offers little resistance.
What else happened that night with that old lady?
I raped her.
Now, we were very interested in, if you've done this one, how many others have you done?
It doesn't take much. Within hours, the suspect confesses that he committed 2 of the 6 remaining assaults. Do police finally have their rapist? They're worried that the confession was too easy, so they decide to test it.
Normally, in a matter like this, you've always got some holdback evidence, something that only the bad guy would know, or possibly the victim as well, and ultimately the police. He wasn't able to come up with any holdback stuff that we had.
Broke in the front door?
I saw her go in the house.
So the investigators ask Chevalier to point out the locations of the crimes he claims to have committed.
He pointed out a couple of houses where, to the best of our knowledge, nothing ever happened. I think he was enjoying the spotlight a little bit.
I just used a crowbar.
But the suspect now surprises police by showing knowledge of the crime involving the $20 bill.
And then her bedroom was on the right-hand side.
We ended up charging him with that one.
Chevalier is eventually convicted of that crime, but police aren't convinced that he had any connection to the other 6 attacks.
He was, I think, 21, early 20s when he was convicted, which would have made him a teenager when these attacks started. So I didn't get the sense in the early 90s that anyone thought these cases had been solved because of that one case.
There wasn't a great sense of relief on the part of the investigators. I know there certainly wasn't on my part, simply because we felt he was good for the 1, but that left the other 6 unaddressed.
With Chevalier behind bars, 2 new reports of rape and robbery in the area force Colchester police to confront a cold reality. Their rapist is still at large. A disturbing pattern starts to emerge.
We were looking for a commonality between all these victims.
Some victims had members of the police actually in their families. The third one had 2 grandsons who were RCMP, a son who was actually on the Colchester police. The second one, her son was actually an identification officer with the RCMP.
In fact, one of my investigators, his aunt was a victim.
So it sort of raised the specter, did this person hate the police?
Was the attacker trying to engage police in the ultimate game of payback? Who is the monster who has been terrorizing this community for over 11 years? Only a revolution in forensic science can shine light into the darkest corners of our fears. From 1981 to 1992, 9 women have been brutally raped and robbed in the countryside near Windsor, Ontario. The eldest is 83 years old. Police have been repeatedly frustrated by a lack of solid evidence. But now a revolution in forensic science is underway.
This is just when DNA technology was coming to the fore in Canada.
Surprisingly, the new technology is based on a very small part of human DNA.
Most of that DNA is actually the same amongst the whole population, but a small fraction of that DNA differs, and that's why you look different than the people around you. And a small portion of that differs tremendously. Those are called hypervariable parts of the DNA.
DNA technology compares these hypervariable areas in 2 samples of DNA, usually one from a crime scene and one from a suspect. If these hypervariable areas are the same, the chance that the 2 samples come from separate people is low.
If you just looked at one area, the chance of you having a profile and another person having the same profile at one location might be 1 in 10. Not very discriminating. But when you get to 3 and 4 locations, then that discrimination potential increases to 1 in thousands to 1 in hundreds of thousands. Once we get to 9 locations, there's a great discrimination potential.
But the good news is quickly overshadowed when the rapist sends shockwaves through Colchester County. The worst fears of police are realized when a woman in her 70s is found murdered. Her hands are tied to her bed. The MO is consistent with the previous attacks.
The body of Mary Louise Amlin was discovered in her house in Malden Township. Police say she was bound and gagged before she was murdered. Police know how she died, but won't release that information. There is no forensic evidence that Amlin was sexually assaulted. However, the position of the body and the fact Amlin was tied up led police to that theory. Inspector Jim Hutchison of the OPP.
Person broke in, but not with the intent, the sole intent of stealing, that a sexual assault was the intent of the break and enter.
Gord Amlin discovered his mother's body.
I'm thoroughly convinced that it's someone locally, and I'm thoroughly convinced that they will find the person.
A new task force is created to investigate the murder. Their first question, is this homicide related to the previous sexual assaults?
There was a lot of similarities. A lot of similarities. Point of entry, window. Similarity. Phone lines cut. Similarity.
She lived in Malden Township, which was in the area of the Geographic
hunting zone of the Colchester Rapist.
Investigators are very aware of the power that DNA technology puts in their hands. They scour the murder scene for the killer's DNA, but another question still haunts them.
If we catch the person for the rapes, do we catch the person for the homicide?
With the rape cases, police can now make use of the new technology and return to the semen samples collected years ago for blood typing.
These were either internal samples taken from the victims, or they were the night clothes worn by the victims. And these samples contain semen. We produced DNA profiles from those semen stains. Those profiles then were compared to each other to see whether or not they came from different people or the same person.
After 15 years, police finally get their first definitive answer.
Those cases indicated one individual that had committed the sexual assaults at the time conclusively.
It was a single offender for each case, and the same offender for each case.
Pretty violent affair, wouldn't you say?
With this decisive new information, investigators approach their first major suspect, Manuel Fortuna. Fortuna now has a chance to exonerate himself.
It gnawed away at him for those 18 years. I think it's a pretty devastating allegation.
He jumps at the chance to give a DNA sample.
Months after we had collected his buccal swab, I went back to Manuel Fortuna's house personally. And we felt that we had to do that rather than a phone call and advise him and his family that, that he was not responsible for these rapes.
After many years living under a cloud, Manuel Fortuna is finally and completely exonerated. Police then approach David Chevalier, the man convicted for the rape involving the $20 bill. He too agrees to provide a DNA sample for comparison to the DNA gathered at 3 of the crime sites.
They did not match.
DNA proves that Chevalier had nothing to do with the 3 rapes for which there are semen samples. The rape for which he was convicted yielded no DNA, so he serves out his sentence for that crime. Investigators finally have evidence that can identify a suspect with absolute certainty. But they have no suspect to match to the evidence. So the team turns to an emerging forensic technique.
This seemed to be the exact type of case that geographic profiling would assist the investigation.
The theory behind geographic profiling is that offenders commit crimes in areas they're comfortable.
Rapists, like many other kinds of offenders, will feel most comfortable in an area that they're familiar with, just as all of us have our own little habits and ways of controlling our environment, if you like. So that for a rapist to choose individuals to rape that they can get easy access to and make a good escape would make perfect sense.
We can look at how far they're likely to travel in certain directions based on what kinds of crimes they're willing to commit.
The profiler then identifies a central area that is within a comfortable distance of the crime sites.
I was able to identify an area south of Windsor where I believed it was most likely that the offender lived.
Police now have a target zone only a few kilometers across. They look for people on their suspect list who live in this small area.
Took the list from 200 people of interest down to a possible 29 or 30.
The goal now is to approach every one of them for a DNA sample. Surprisingly, most people cooperate.
I just want to clear you as a suspect, sir. We just need a sample of your DNA.
Why do some comply and why some don't? I mean, the ones that comply do because they have nothing to hide.
Oh, what can I do for you? Sir, mind if we come in? By all means. Just outside, kids.
But there is another reason. Even the men on the suspect list with criminal records are shocked by the nature of these crimes.
Several of them were quite upset that we would even think that they may have something to do with it.
Police.
But not all contacts go so smoothly.
Just wondering if you wouldn't mind providing us with a DNA sample.
You gotta be kidding.
Just to clear your name up.
Several of the suspects politely told us that they didn't want any part of it. So now we had to develop ways to acquire their DNA. And what I mean by that is now we're looking at throwaway DNA, discarded DNA, garbage DNA. So we spent months following people, doing surveillance on people, watching people's houses.
There's the goods. Right there. Good.
Like two arms of a pincer, geographic profiling and DNA analysis are slowly closing in on a suspect. In a race against time, police ramp up their resources. Every effort is devoted to catching the killer.
You realize that you have a ticking time bomb out there that's going to happen again.
Investigators are poised on a nice edge between hope and fear when a routine interview leads to a dramatic breakthrough. A violent rapist has been terrorizing Colchester County for more than 17 years. His most recent attack ended in murder. Police turned to geographic profiling to identify a list of suspects. Now they need their DNA.
On that suspect list was a person by the name of Stanley Bayliss. He was well known to police. We went to his residence, spoke to him, asked him if he would come out and speak to us in our van. And within seconds of being in the van, he starts saying that, "Oh, I know why you're here. It's about the car."
It's that car thing, right? All I was there for was to steal that car.
Police listen intently as Bayliss unexpectedly takes them back to his role in the very first case 17 years ago.
In and out.
They hide their surprise and play along.
And I went, "Yep, that's exactly why we're here. We're here to investigate that." Of course, now we're buying into his story because he's telling us something that is completely unexpected, and this is just a great break for a police officer when someone gives you information that you can deal with.
Bayliss tells them that he stole the lady's car with a friend.
Are you alone?
That it was this friend who sexually assaulted the victim.
Had nothing to do with it. I pulled him off the lady. And after that, I never saw the guy again.
Then Bayliss gives up the friend's name.
You pulled who off the lady?
Dale Greer.
The first victim was assaulted in her bedroom. Bayliss had come upstairs because he'd found the keys for the car and was yelling at Greer, let's go, and was upset with the nature of what Greer was doing to this elderly female, that it was just, a horrifying act.
And after that, I never saw the guy again.
The FBI profile had said that they felt that on the very first rape, which was actually supposed to be just a theft of a vehicle, that the two offenders that went in the residence were friends. That after what happened to the first victim, they would probably part ways.
Stanley Bayliss is not the rapist, but he has given police a prime suspect. After 17 years, they finally have a name.
We have Mr. Bayliss telling us that he was at the first scene, he was with Dale Greer. Now we're thinking, geez, I wonder if Dale's the guy for the rest of them.
Dale Greer is actually one of the men on the suspect list developed from the geographic profiling. He also has a criminal record. Police have not yet approached him for a DNA sample.
We knew with his previous police involvement that he was not a fan of the police, and that we would have a very tough time even approaching him and even talking to him.
Dale Greer is not exactly what the criminal profile pointed to. He is black, not white, and a family man, not alone.
Dale Greer came from a large family that's lived in the community for a long time, a well-respected family, so people knew each other. I think he himself was not well known in the community. He was an ordinary guy.
Inconsistent to victim reports, he doesn't speak with a foreign accent, but this doesn't rule him out as a suspect.
If you speak with an accent that is not a true accent, it would throw the police off.
That may have likely just been something on his part to confuse the investigators.
What the police need now is a DNA sample, but they believe that asking him directly might tip him off.
So we tried to follow him around. We tried to get his garbage. We tried to get cigarette butts, anything that would give us a solid profile of this person.
But this suspect does not make it easy.
We had really no success in acquiring anything.
What happens next shocks the investigators. Despite wide media coverage and a large police presence, the rapist strikes again. The victim is 77 years old. The MO for this crime is consistent with the other attacks. Incredibly, the house is only a few doors down from Dale Grayer's.
What struck me about that was the boldness of it.
His confidence had to be huge, and every time he did one of these rapes, and apparently, in his mind, would continue to get away with it, his confidence just kept growing.
In fact, he is so arrogant that he leaves behind another piece of evidence, his balaclava. Police are convinced that this overconfident man is Dale Grayer, but they still can't prove it, so they devise a plan to box him in.
I was able to coordinate and obtain enough personnel to have him under surveillance for 24 hours a day.
Trailing Grayer is complicated because he maintains a home in Windsor where his wife and children live and a house in Colchester where he lives alone.
What that entailed was 2 actual surveillance teams. And in order to do that, they had to go to ground. They literally had to crawl and lay on the ground through the night from the time that it became dark until it was light in the morning.
And all officers were instructed that if Dale Grayer left that house at night for any reason, they were to arrest him.
But there is a gap in their surveillance plan. During the day, Grayer drives to his job as a construction worker. They have to keep tabs on him without being seen. So police develop a method to track Grayer in his car. First, they visit a used car lot and find a car almost identical to Grayer's. After getting a tracking warrant, they break into Grayer's car and remove it from the driveway. It is temporarily replaced with the nearly identical car from the dealership.
So we obtained the use of a vehicle that was identical to his, park it in exactly his spot so that if there was, an opportunity where he may have looked out a window or something, the vehicle was there. And he wouldn't have been, wise to the idea that, something was happening.
A police technician now installs a hardwired tracking device under Grayer's car.
And we had the vehicle for less than an hour.
Soon after, they exchange the cars again. Police track Dale Grayer constantly, but they still have no DNA sample, and he is careful not to leave one. After 17 years, will police finally outsmart the Colchester Rapist? For more than 17 years, a violent rapist-turned-killer has eluded police, viciously attacking 10 elderly women. Police need a DNA sample to bring in their #1 suspect. October 14th, 1998. Dale Grayer is finishing his lunch when his attention is suddenly distracted.
Grayer, get this thing out of here!
He spit on the ground. He threw out a paper cup. Then he threw out a napkin.
Photographs were taken of Grayer as he discarded each of those 3 items.
One of our surveillance officers who was in communication with us was told, go and grab the napkin, the cup, and wipe up the spit if you can.
It's a busy construction site. The sample could be destroyed at any second.
I made a call to Cecilia Hageman at the Center of Forensic Science, and she was prepared for us to come down the next morning.
Saliva contains buccal cells. Buccal cells are the cells on the inside of your cheek, and they contain DNA, and that DNA, of course, is the same as the DNA in a person's semen, in the person's blood, anywhere in the body.
The sample from Dale Grayer is compared to the samples from the 4 rapes for which DNA was obtained.
This gentleman's profile was the same, so either he's the source or it's a coincidence. But the chance of the coincidence of the 9 locus profile was 1 in 1.7 trillion.
Police now get a warrant to search Grayer's house. In his basement, they find newspaper articles and other mementos of the Colchester rapes. They also find a collection of violent S&M pornography. Dale Grayer is arrested and charged for the 4 rapes for which DNA is obtained. But he professes his innocence.
He denied being involved vehemently and insisted on many occasions that we had the wrong person.
No one believes Dale Grayer's denials.
How do you refute scientific evidence that the only person on the face of the earth has contributed this body fluid and left it at a crime scene? How does that person explain how his DNA got to be left on the clothing or inside the body of one of these women who had been victimized?
Neither Grayer nor his lawyer can explain the mystery. He is convicted on all counts. In 2003, he is declared a dangerous offender. He will never see the outside of a prison cell.
Been clean and straight for a while, man. I'm not trying to see that, you know?
Stanley Bayliss is not charged after agreeing to testify against Grayer.
That's exactly what it is.
The remaining 6 rapes and the murder have not yet been solved, and many questions remain. The deepest question is also the simplest. Why?
I think it haunted the victims at the time. I remember that coming out in court, at least one of them asking why. And I don't know that the question why was ever really answered.
It's hard to understand, hard to know what triggered these assaults for which Grayer has been convicted. We just don't know. He didn't cooperate with the psychiatrist. We got no real information, no insight.
I guess he enjoyed the control of these individuals when he broke in. The fact that he could sexually assault them, the fact that he could steal from them, the fact that he could get away for doing it.
Grayer's trail of devastation across Colchester County will forever scar the tight community.
The worst part of it was many of these victims had passed away as a result of natural causes, and they will never know that we caught this guy.
But there are exceptions. These women lived to see Dale Grayer led away in handcuffs.